Though this isn't the center of the graveyard, this is a natural focus point because of the obelisk. And I've actually worked with this obelisk before. I've come here so much. It's really easy to do a ritual when you're walking around in a circle, you're making offerings, or when even if you want to meditate against it. It's a really useful thing to use if you find an obelisk. Sometimes in graveyards as well, statues, they since they're a human form, they attract the spirit or ghost of an individual who's passed away, and it's not ready quite to go, so it'll inhabit in some minor sense a statue. Now, that doesn't mean the statue comes to life, but you can feel the human essence when you interact with it or when you stare at it. It's one of the reasons why when I was a kid, I was always creeped out by statues in cemeteries, but I didn't really know why. Now that I know why, I'm actually not as creeped out by it. Of course, I've changed quite a bit. Now, it's always good to find a focus point that's also a tree. The tree will kind of soak up some of the energy of those who have passed as well, but it'll also be a wise tree, if you will, because it has learned from being around humans at their worst and at their best, depending on if the person left behind more joy than pain in their lives. Now this is a pretty big graveyard, and there's actually not a lot of statues, unfortunately. There's one over yonder, and this graveyard was founded in 1880 or 1860, somewhere around there, and it's been gathering people since then. But old cemeteries are really what you want to find for some of the best results when you're working with spirits. Some of the newer ones just don't have enough residue, if you will. I wonder who's been working over here. Hint, it was me. But it's interesting about the pigment of blood. It'll actually stay on a stone for a good amount of time. I'm not sure how well you can see that. I'm not going to go into the ritual that I did, but it'll actually stay on stone for a long time. And if you do work with blood on gravestones, you usually don't want to make it too noticeable, in case there's somebody that wants to work against you, or in case somebody just is going to wash it off. So you want to make it not noticeable, and that's kind of what I did here, especially since this is the back of the grave and then the front is on the other side. But yeah, just be wary of putting your blood in a graveyard regardless, because there might be some spirits that want to track you down as well. But this is one of those instances where do as I say, not as I do. Here's another quick tip. See this gravestone, how it's broken? You might want to actually write this gravestone, put it back where it belongs, kind of at least put the stones on top of each other to show respect to the dead, but I highly advise against that, because actually doing that is a felony. It's considered altering a monument, and it's a felony even to prop the stone back up and try to make it look presentable again. So just be wary of that when you're working in a graveyard. Do not alter the monuments, i.e. gravestones, in any way, in regards to the stones. Of course, in the past I have righted gravestones, and out of respect for the dead, but this is just a word of warning for anybody out there who wants to do that. Here we go. Here's that statue I was talking about. It's kind of in shadow right now, so I'm not sure you can see it as well as I can, but there's definitely something in that statue. I don't even have to look at it very long before I start to see it move. But it's more like residual motion, like a blur without it actually moving. Hard to explain, really. There's definitely some spirit or spirits clinging on to a human form in this statue, especially since it's basically the only one in the whole graveyard. So this might be good to work with as well if you want to do a ritual, if you want to call to the spirits in the graveyard, if you want to try to contact this individual spirit in this individual grave. This is a great image to look upon and focus on, and you look right into the eyes as you're speaking the words to the spirit of this grave and trying to learn a little bit more about it and the graveyard, if you want to do that. Prepare yourselves for a little bit of a Dharma talk here. Now, when I'm walking through a graveyard, I often think about Yama, the Lord of the Dead in Hinduism, and how he guides souls to where they're supposed to go, into the realm of the dead. Highly symbolic, true to a certain extent. He has his water buffalo that kind of transports things with him, transports bodies sometimes, spirits, if you will, life force, but also the egos that are left that still want to hold on to something relative to this realm, which will be found in the realm of the ancestors, the realm of the dead, which is a certain level in Hinduism. Now, I also think about Hades, Pluto, if you will. His job is not necessarily to give judgment to the dead, but to guide them to where they're supposed to go. Mortician, if you will. And, you know, as human beings, we feel this, while we're alive, we feel this need to know where we're going. People hide from it. People try to explain it away. Whether you be atheist, Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, Muslim, Jewish person, it doesn't really matter. We all want to explain the purpose of our existence. And death is often seen as something dark, something terrible, something that should be shunned because it's evil. But that's a little bit left over from the Greek idea with Hades. A lot of the time, Hades wasn't understood as evil necessarily, but he was to be avoided and not really praised because he dealt with something we didn't want to meet. But I feel as human consciousness has moved forward, as we've started to understand ourselves on a more intrinsic spiritual level, we've started to not be afraid of death. Even atheists seem to accept oblivion far easier now than they ever have, which is actually a step in the right direction. Accepting that there will be an end to things, that it's not just about not thinking about it. It's also about considering it and accepting it, whatever you believe, no matter what you believe. As an individual who believes in reincarnation and karma, I always return to the same quote: Dharma is not about justice. It is about empathy and growth. It's not about punishing people, but reforming them so that they can move on to greater stages of realization, greater stages of being, and eventually flowing back into the oneness from which we all came, tossing aside our discerning intellectual factor of this is that and that is not that. Ultimately, these things are compromises. Either everything is one or nothing is. Those are the two understandings that don't have the biased compromises in between. This doesn't necessarily mean duality. This is a truth beyond duality. That understanding is more of a circle than a line. It's not that you have evil on one side and good on the other side. When I say understanding is more of a circle, it's more about coming to the same conclusion that we had before we started the question to begin with, before we started to try to understand. That oneness of understanding, that epitome of thought, that undifferentiated knowledge that is inherent to humanity. as an individual who has studied many spiritual systems and religions, I found that they are all, as you know, the old Buddhist/Hindu saying goes, different blind wise men grabbing different parts of the elephant. One grabs the trunk, thinks it's a snake. One grabs the leg, thinks it's a pillar. One grabs the body, thinks it's a boulder or a vast rock of some kind that kind of has noises coming from in between. One grasps the tail, thinking it's a rope. And all the while, since they're blind, they can't see the other parts. But really, no matter what you believe, it's a different part of the same whole. All beliefs are connected. All people are connected. And as soon as we realize that and accept each other for our beliefs, for other people's beliefs, then we will find peace and camaraderie among men.